I'm Exarchos, Head of Business Development at Resolute, Cepal, Greece, and partner at Resolute Asset Management. And I will be your moderator for this panel today. As we all know, Greece is going through an affordable housing crisis. Statistics support this observation, and public opinion surveys indicate that a long-term viable solution is necessary. A solution that is founded on a robust regulatory framework, one that reflects lessons from the past, addresses the needs of its citizens, and incorporates successful international models that could be effectively implemented in Greece. The name of the solution is social housing. And over the next 35 minutes, we'll unpack this very interesting topic with our esteemed speakers who bring deep knowledge and expertise on the matter. To that extent, I'd like to introduce you to the four distinguished speakers. Mr. Konstantinos Gloumis-Atsalakis, Secretary General for the Demography and Housing Policy at the Ministry of Social Cohesion and Family Affairs. My esteemed friend and colleague, Robert Kingsmill, who is a founding partner of Resolute and a director of Resolute Group in the UK. Ilias Nikolaidis, Content Director at diaNEOsis Greece. And Chryssos Kavounides, Managing Director and Partner at BCG Athens. My first question goes to you, Konstantinos. As Secretary General at the Ministry of Social Cohesion and Social Affairs, you're at the forefront of addressing Greece's housing challenges. You have recently taken some major steps towards improving access to affordable housing. Could you share with us the key elements of the national strategy and how social housing fits into this broader framework?
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here today on the Delphi Economic Forum on this crucial topic on social housing. Housing lies at the heart of social cohesion, and that's the role of our Ministry of Social Cohesion and Family as well. And it also lies at the heart of the demographic stability and the sustainable economic development. So, yet today across Greece and Europe alike, affordable and secure housing is becoming increasingly inaccessible. Rising property prices, escalating rents, inadequate supply of affordable housing units have created substantial pressures on the society and have caused disproportionate pressure to young adults, single-parent families and vulnerable groups. Apart from these, the challenges that Greece also faces is the geographical realities, extensive mountainous mainland and numerous remote islands, the rapid growth of tourism in urban areas and in the islands as well, and the previous economic and housing recession that has limited the housing stock dramatically. We need to take also into consideration climate changes that really affect the housing issues and the requirement for environmental sustainability. Ultimately, our vision is not just to respond effectively to today's housing crisis, but to proactively shape the conditions that will benefit future generations. And recognizing this multifaceted nature of these challenges, the Greek government has prioritized housing in its strategic agenda. We have, since 2022, the first law after many decades on housing, Law 5006. We have in 2023 the creation, the establishment of the Ministry of Social Cohesion and Family, within the Ministry, the General Secretariat for Demographic and Housing Policy, addressing housing and demographic challenges in an integrated manner. Since then, the government has launched over 40 targeted policy initiatives, mobilizing resources exceeding 6.5 billion euro in recent years. And these interventions range from financial incentives and subsidies for home ownership, rentals, to strategic private and public partnerships designed to rejuvenate and expand our housing stock in a sustainable way. So I'll just briefly refer to the key elements and the pillars of this housing policy. The first one, it's actually mainly 6 main elements on this. It's promoting home ownership. There we have the My Home Project 1 and 2. It's a total budget of 3 billion euro addressed to 30,000 beneficiaries, providing subsidized loans targeted mostly to younger people and generations. We have, on the second pillar, the construction and the provision of social and affordable housing, and we have introduced the public property reciprocal exchange scheme, κοινωνική αντιπαροχή, which is an innovative collaboration of the public and the private sector, focused on the construction of social housing and affordable housing, making use of underutilized public property that hasn't been utilized so far, and incentivizing the private sector in real estate development to invest in affordable housing, something that hasn't been done before in the Greek market. The third pillar is the provision of social rental services targeting specifically vulnerable groups. We have different programs like housing and employment for the homeless, providing both housing and employment opportunities. It's a program that is running currently in 42 municipalities and will be expanded up to 80 municipalities within this year. We have the coverage program for the beneficiaries of the GMI, guaranteed minimum income, especially targeted again to single-parent families, to families and vulnerable groups. And we have this pilot program funded through the RRF, the Athens and Thessaloniki social housing program, which is a financing to the municipalities in order to renovate older homes and provide them to people with housing needs. And it's an important program, this one, even though it's a small-scale one, because it is introducing for the first time a new collaboration scheme between the central government and the municipalities, which is really a key aspect in the housing problems. The fourth pillar is energy upgrades for the housing stock. I will not refer extensively to that. It's mainly run by the Ministry of Environment and Energy, but it is energy efficiency is a really crucial aspect of the housing crisis in Greece. And the fifth pillar is the housing subsidy policy. It's something, it's a core part of a housing policy. It's mainly targeted to the demand side, which is a problem for us, but still it's a necessary measure in order to address vulnerable populations that cannot actually afford their rent. So we have the housing allowance, we have a specific allowance for the uninsured elderly, and we also have the student housing allowance, which is important for students studying in universities across the country. And finally, I would just say the sixth and the final pillar, which is really important, is the regulation on the housing market, which is especially targeted to the support of the supply side, which is necessary nowadays in Greece. We have a regulation on short-term rentals and on the golden visa. Some restrictions have been introduced. We have an exemption from rent tax for 3 years for owners who rent a vacant home, or if they have a short-term lease and they convert it to a long-term lease, then they also get this tax reduction. We have a prohibition of new short-term leases in 3 main regions of the municipality of Athens for a year, and we will assess this. So within this comprehensive framework, social housing emerges as a cornerstone strategy, not only ensuring immediate relief to the vulnerable groups, but also enabling long-term demographic stabilization, social cohesion, and the inclusive urban development.
Thank you very much for that very deep insight. Super interesting, and congratulations for all these initiatives that you have initiated, and seem to be moving in a very good direction.
There's still a lot of work to be done, but I think this is the right direction towards that.
Well done. Thank you. My next question goes to Ilias. To that extent, Ilias, can I ask you to expand on your research and data regarding Greece's housing crisis and picking up on the Secretary General's insights?
Okay, yeah, sure. Thank you so much for having me on this panel. Well, diaNEOsis is an independent non-profit think tank. We do research for all sorts of topics. In 2023, we published a long-form article, which I edited, on housing policy in Greece, mixing it with best practices from around Europe. And we aim to touch upon the issue again with a lengthier study in the coming months. So what we did find? We did find what has now been very vivid in the public discourse locally, that housing costs for Greek households are really high. It's the highest rate of overburden spending for housing. It's the highest. which means that the highest rate of households that spend over 40% of their income in housing in the whole EU. It's also the highest cost of housing whatsoever. So Greek households spend around 30%, if I'm correct, with the most updated data for housing. And then we tried to sort of explore what would be the reasons behind this very alarming picture. Of course, what differentiates Greece from other countries in the EU is the economic crisis during the past decade, which is sort of intuitive because incomes shrunk and they haven't recovered since. Whereas housing prices, because of housing prices fell, there was lots of demand from abroad, related and unrelated to tourism, and so this imbalance became very obvious. However, there are other less obvious factors that seem to play some role on that. One of them is the demographic development of the country. The Secretary General, of course, sort of associated the issue of housing with the demographic problem Greece has, but there are other less explicit ways where this connection takes place. For example, households tend to be less and less numerous in Greece, and in most of Europe it's a trend we see. So more dwellings are needed, more housing units are needed. And of course it was the financial crisis which stopped construction, so not much supply. So all of these factors sort of became led to the image we see today, and to Greece being an outlier in terms of the statistics. And the other part of our study was what can be done. Another thing which sort of we inherited from the crisis is the shut down the seas of any housing policy in Greece. In 2012, within a very, very bad storm, most of you here have experienced it, the main organization in the state, which was far from perfect, OEK, the Workers' Housing Organization, shut down. And since, until very recently, we haven't been discussing at all about housing policy, which of course left vulnerable households at a situation, and that's perhaps one of the main reasons we're here discussing how housing policy can restart in a better and more comprehensive way. So that would be pretty much the analysis. I don't know if I haven't covered any.
No, that's super insightful and useful, and paints a very interesting picture about the situation. But I have a lot more questions, but we need to move on because time is moving on. My third question goes to Rob. Rob, I think we all agree that there is a need for a social housing policy here in Greece. I know that Resolute in the UK has worked and partnered with housing associations to deliver such solutions. Do you believe that international models such as the UK's could be used in Greece, albeit in a modified way or in a Greekified way?
Sure. Thank you for having me, and thank you for letting me speak at your forum. I think the short answer, is yes, but I think there's a better answer to give. And the first point I'll say is, even though the affordable housing structure in the UK has existed for about 150 years, in the election in October, it was still one of the highest priority issues. So we still, in the UK, have a very high housing challenge. People use the word crisis. I don't know if that's true. So I think the best message to communicate in this forum is, I think we have some ideas, but I think, and listening to the issues and as they're presented, the right approach is to adapt or adopt elements from international markets rather than to have some fool come from the UK and say, we know what you should do. That's certainly not the approach. My first reflection, and I heard some of the policies there, is housing isn't just about real estate. It needs to be about that there's the economic case, there's the tax case and the affordability which flows into it. And one thing I don't think I heard mentioned specifically, it's planning and the urban planning environment. And you need to get all the elements of those policies combined together. In the UK, they have a body called Homes England, and we've worked closely with them. And that is charged with developing home ownership. We have greenfield, brownfields, and so I'm hearing those same issues come up here quite a bit. And I would add, and I think this is born out of my experience in the sector the last 3 or 4 years, or 7 or 8 years, is you need to make sure that you're managing your assets very well. If you get the management wrong, and asset management is a nice soft word, but if you're not managing these portfolios of assets, you can have some appalling errors made, and you will have seen the headlines coming out of the UK. And some of these housing associations have 100,000 plus homes. And if you look at it in that context and you say, are you sure that those homes are being looked after and the residents are enjoying a safe, comfortable, clean lifestyle? The answer, sadly, too often is not the case. So I'd like to give a couple of sort of select pieces, and I'll keep it down to 3, which may be ideas that work, which we haven't heard yet. The first, and I've heard talk about the programs to get home ownership increased. There's a concept in the UK called shared ownership, which is a fractional ownership where you can buy a house or an apartment starting at a 5% payment. You pay rent on the balance, and then you do something called staircase. So it helps people who have jobs but find the affordability at their starting salary difficult, but they can get to home ownership as they develop and their career develops. So that may be a subject. You get bank funding for it, it's settled, so you need to have the integrated financing, you need to have the properties managed, but that could be an idea. I've heard a lot of talk about vacant properties and neighbourhoods. Maybe there's tax policies that could be pursued, zero rating VAT or something that supports developers when you're looking at developing those urban areas. And there's another element in the UK which is planning based, and I won't try and pronounce it because I'll get it wrong, but your airport development here, where one of my old team members is currently working, in the UK that would have had a 40% allocation to affordable housing. So the planning system embeds affordable housing. So instead of 1,000 homes being developed for high-end or somewhere else, that would be 600 for the market, 400 for affordable housing, and so on and so forth. And that also delivers a very good social good, which is you get integrated communities rather than ghettos of affordable housing with one socio-economic class, but you can tailor that, and that delivers really good, livable and diverse communities, which is very valued. I'll wrap up quickly, but so I think good looks like having that integrated strategic policy with all those elements of both government, private sector and management. And that would help, I think, with new build and the vacant and the regeneration of land, which seems to be what I'm hearing is one of the great challenges.
Well, in fact, the previous panel did touch upon it, but you missed it because it's in Greek. But it used to be a bit of a taboo word in Greece. I think now it's becoming more, people are realizing that it has to be viewed as part of the solution. Thank you very much for that, Rob. My fourth question goes to you, Chryssos. To that extent, certainly eligibility criteria are very important to this matter. Can you please expand on what you believe should be these criteria?
Yeah, of course, and thank you very much for having me on the panel. First of all, just to reinforce, we also did a housing study in Southern Europe. It was coincidentally also in 2023.
Okay.
So
it was a hot year.
We found there that in Greece, 35% of households have affordability issues with housing, right? If that's across the board, you can imagine that if you look at specific demographics and segments of society, that percentage is huge, right?
And how does that compare with the rest of Europe? It's like
And-
three
and
times the
it's-
European average.
It's much higher than the European average. It is a problem across South Europe, however,
Yeah.
right? Now, to go to your question on eligibility, I would focus on three key points, and I think that we've heard a lot in terms of things that go down that route. The first is we need to be very clear on what we're trying to achieve, because the eligibility criteria and how we develop these programs is fundamentally different depending on the outcome we're trying to achieve, right? And I think we heard a number of pillars, and each of them have a very distinct target group, and therefore the eligibility criteria are different. And that follows on to the second point, which is about very clear segmentation. Clearly, there needs to be some forms of means testing, obviously. Usually we look at household income, the size of the household, the cost of property in that area, and that fits into the means testing. But beyond that, there are different eligibility criteria depending on the outcome we're trying to achieve. So, for example, we will look differently if we're looking at low-income working families, which is a lot about dealing with rent over burden, where, for example, we might be looking at purely means-based and looking at subsidies for rental, for example. You could be looking at young adults where you want to get them on the property ladder, and we heard some examples of how you go about that in this case. So single-parent households, the elderly, and so on and so forth. And the eligibility criteria needs to be data-based and differentiated by objective. And the third point on eligibility is we often think of eligibility very much on entering social housing, right? But eligibility criteria needs to be there also to drive exiting from the concept of social housing. What we want to make sure is that we are creating upwards mobility and people are able to achieve home ownership or being able to live in the premises they want to live in and be self-sustained. So how do we combine that with other initiatives that ensure that there are initiatives, triggers, mechanisms to help people move out of the scheme and create that mobility? We're seeing a lot of great examples of this called graduated support models in Austria. We're seeing them in the Netherlands. So a lot of great examples out there that we can leverage on to make sure that this is not just about housing and about subsidies and subsidizing people's incomes, but it is creating genuine value addition in the community, and people are upwards mobile in terms of their ability to live in the home they want to live in.
Thank you very much. Very interesting points indeed. To that extent, I would like to thank everyone for being on time and very brief. So we also have the opportunity to have a second round of questions, which is very good. Konstantinos, Secretary General, as we consider international models and Greece's specific challenges, legislation and regulatory frameworks will play a key role in ensuring social housing programs that are sustainable and effective. What further regulatory or policy changes do you believe are necessary to facilitate further the development and management of the social housing in Greece?
So, in order to ensure sustainability and effectiveness of social housing programs, it is needed to strengthen the legislative and regulatory framework according to holistic and internationally recognized approaches. And I would say that, first of all, what we need to do is actually define the terms social and affordable housing, which is something that is not exactly clear in Greece yet, and especially to the market that we would like also to participate investing on these projects. Drawing on recent research, we propose crucial regulatory and policy enhancements across 5 interconnected dimensions. The first one, and I think Robert was very clear on that, is precise and transparent targeting, development of robust eligibility criteria and transparent allocation processes to ensure that social housing support reaches beneficiaries and families fairly and efficiently, prioritizing vulnerable demographics while fostering inclusive communities. The second one is integrated public and inclusive design. We mentioned that before, and it was really enlightening the previous panel on that, on the importance of urban planning. What I would just like to say on this is that we need to align the housing initiatives with broader urban regeneration goals. We have seen some very interesting and successful, I would say, Bauhaus projects, especially under the EU, not just, and they're starting also in Greece to develop, so this is really important, and it's important to see how we can also enhance this even further. The third one is effective operations and maintenance framework. It's really crucial. We see that in every scheme that has social housing, the important thing is just to certify that there is operations and maintenance framework for that. And we see that this was the problem during the previous years, that Greece actually had a social housing scheme that didn't actually work during the decades. So establishing a rigorous quality standards, monitoring frameworks, and sustainable managing systems to maintain social housing stock over time, ensuring long-term viability and value and its value preservation. The fourth one, sustainable financing mechanisms, and I think we're also working a lot towards that direction, utilizing diversified funding systems. We had the RRF, we have the European structural funds, InvestEU, and now we're also into discussions with the European Investment Bank. It's also running affordable housing projects and funding on these projects at the European scale. So creating stable finance fiscal incentives to attract private investments in social housing projects. And the fifth one is clearly defined provider roles, strengthening the institutional framework, possibly by establishing a national housing authority that we lacked at the point in Greece, centralizing the oversight and clearly delineating responsibilities among public entities, the central government, municipalities, local authorities, and public and private sector investors. So together, these 5 dimensions represent an overarching blueprint for ensuring Greece's social housing initiatives are both effective and resilient in the long term. And I would just like to mention as a closing remark on my points that the Greek government remains fully committed to this vision. Our national housing strategy illustrates our dedication in creating equitable, resilient, and inclusive communities, safeguarding the right to adequate housing for the current and the future generations.
Well, thank you very much. That's, again, super interesting and useful for us to know. And again, good luck and congratulations for this really powerful initiative. Back to Rob. Rob, I'd like to touch upon 2 points that Konstantinos now touched upon, and you started also before. Essentially, the reuse model that we have in the UK, and also the financing, because financing is starting to appear on the discussions, and it's quite important. From what I remember, in the UK, the sector is actually financed fully by the private sector banks because the structure is such that it can be done. Can we have your comments on that, please?
On the financing, there is state support through a grant system, but there is private finance at all levels. So there's commercial lending into housing associations, which provide, and the model, and I won't bore the room, but it's about 60-65%. You have the grant system, and they have their own equity, which they've built up over years. So that the finance is a blended model. And the other point, again, I'm picking up, and it sounds like there's a convergence between what we do in the UK and having a central authority. So I think it sounds like Greece is going down a path which I recognise and would support. And I think I should be shameless and say, the platform we have here with Resolute Cepal is a great platform, and the Resolute experience we could bring in, and we'd love to help you with some of that. The other point, data has come up twice, and we also have 2 data businesses, one here in Greece and one in the wider Recognize group. We need to understand exactly what the issues are, and this gets to a point raised. If you don't get that right, you won't get the right solutions. So data is a wonderful term, and a lot of people like to talk about it, but you need to get the right data, and then developing the strategy involves making some hard choices. So I think having that uniform national housing policy and the right administration and management, but making the right choices within that would be, it sounds like the next step, and it sounds like Greece is well on the way.
Thank you for that. We need to trot on. So my next question goes to Ilias. Ilias, the avoidance of ghettoized areas is key to the successful implementation of social housing and its image. Have you seen such cases in the past? Are Greeks skeptical or biased against state providing housing solutions?
Thank you. It's great that you implicate this point, because what I would like to stress, and what was very obvious from the previous panel as well, is that housing is not just an economic or a financial issue. It has to do with deeper perceptions and beliefs. It's about how we live together, how we coexist, and how we build our cities upon our notions. So, coming to your question, we run surveys, we run polls. We see that 10% is very concerned about housing as a problem, and we see that the top concern of the Greek population is the demographic problem. So if we sort of put this together, and if we look a bit back to the past, and we see that the whole system of social but also non-social housing in Greece was built around home ownership, this may be a bit of a barrier. Maybe we cannot see past this point, and maybe that's why a further consensus and a national strategy that will be very hands-on may be needed, and also looking at best practices in other countries, the UK included.
Thank you very much. On to Chryssos. Chryssos, can you give us your feedback, and you probably also have the closing practically remarks. How can we develop a model that draws from the successful international examples, utilizes existing assets, assigns management to experienced asset managers, and ultimately fosters economic growth?
Yeah, so I think it's very important that first of all, we think of this as a lever and an enabler of economic growth, right? Rather than, many times we perceive it as the opposite, as a cost, right? And I think that there's a number of examples of how we need to do that and how we need to think about that. The first, and I think it's been mentioned to a certain extent, is utilize existing assets. We need to reuse existing assets. There's an estimated 500,000 vacant assets. You probably have a better figure, but in Greece at the moment, many of them in disrepair. So in the context of upgrading the stock, which I think you mentioned as well, this creates also economic growth. It also means that we're reutilizing, we're repopulating areas, and so on and so forth. And I think Spain, for example, has done a fantastic job of directing EU funds in that direction. Empowering, as you said, professional asset managers, not let the state do that. There are companies out there that do this extremely well. They have the experience, and if you get it right, then you have a sustainable portfolio of assets that are managed effectively and efficiently. And we have seen examples in the past, particularly in Greece, where this has not worked. So PPP models, which we have been increasingly utilizing in Greece, I think need to go in this direction. I think there's great examples in a number of countries. Vienna springs to mind as one which has been particularly successful. Then there's an element of combining this with skills and jobs and upskilling. So we've seen situations where we create these housing elements not only within the urban redevelopment, but also where we are creating hubs for new jobs. And combining this allows a more strategic perspective on both the demographic distribution, but also creating affordable housing where people need it, close to the jobs we want to create. We can combine it with the reskilling programs and build up those capabilities. And I think we have great examples in Italy, for example, where this has been implemented very successfully. And finally, we have a huge opportunity through EU funding, which is predominantly directed at the stock upgrading in terms of sustainability and environmental efficiency. This is a great opportunity to direct funds into this kind of work without it being an increased burden on the national budget.
That's perfect, because we have 16 seconds, which gives me enough time to thank everyone. Thank, first of all, the panel, for you for attending and for your very interesting insights. And thank you for everyone attending.